Hello, everybody. Welcome back again to our last session of this year. And for this session, I have chosen to present to you some of the poems that were chosen by Irish people a couple of years ago as Ireland's favourite poems over the last 100 years. This initiative started by our national broadcaster, and it was to try and ask people, well, everybody in Ireland loves poetry, but what are our favourite poems? And people wrote into the radio, wrote into the television, and nominated their favourite poems, and they were asked to give memories and stories and artworks about these poems. And there was a huge response from the public. And we ended up with about 130 poems from the last 100 years nominated by the public. And so a jury was then set up, and they whittled down these poems to a list of 10, which were the short list. And then people were asked to discuss these poems in their groups and in their reading clubs, and to then vote for which one of these short list of 10 poems would be their favourite poem of the last 100 years. And the jury as well were considered, they wanted it to be part of the story that tells of us as a people over the past 100 years, and also to put poetry firmly at the heart of the national conversation in Ireland. And it certainly achieved this, and there was wonderful debate and wonderful engagement by the public, and the performances of each of the 10 poems by students from secondary schools across the country, and prize winners from Poetry Aloud, which is a national poetry speaking competition for secondary schools that's run in Ireland. And so, well, I don't have time today to bring you the 10 poems, but I'm going to bring you 6 of those poems, which happen to be some of my favourite poems as well. So I'm going to start off without any further ado. And of course, William Butler Yeats made the final 10. And his poem, Easter 1916, resonates with all Irish people, I think. And so I'm going to start off with that one, as is customary on this little broadcast, and give you William Butler Yeats' Easter 1916. I have met them at the close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head, or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I have done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley is worn, all changed, changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument, until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers, when young and beautiful she rode to harriers? This man had kept a school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed, a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart. Yet I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone, to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moorhens dive, and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live, the stones in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part. Our part, to murmur name upon name as a mother names her child. When sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild, what is it but nightfall? No, no, not night, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith for all that is done and said. We know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. And what if excessive love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in verse. MacDonagh and McBride and Connolly and Pearce, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. My next poem is also by a favourite poet of mine, Patrick Kavanagh. He came from County Monaghan, where my dad came from. And my dad, although a very clever man, was never received the benefit of a full education. He left primary school when he was 12 or 13, as was very, very common at the time. He was a son of a tenant farmer, as was Patrick Kavanagh. Patrick Kavanagh himself was one of 10, and he also left school, left the primary school at around 11 or 12. And my dad really identified with this man who came from such a poor background in his native county of County Monaghan. And I think he had a pride in him because of how well he did and how well he was known and how famous he was, that he could come from such a background and yet be such a prominent person in Irish literature. And the fact that where I come from, my surname Lennon, isn't that well known around County Mayo, but in County Monaghan, it's full of Lennons. And that's mentioned in this lovely poem, A Christmas Childhood by Patrick Kavanagh. He wrote it in two parts. The first part he wrote later than the second part. And the first part is like of an adult thinking back of the place where he grew up. And in the second part, you hear the child's voice looking out and thinking about a Christmas childhood. One side of the potato pits was white with frost. How wonderful that was. How wonderful. And when we put our ears to the paling post, the music that came out was magical. The light between the ricks of hay and straw was a hole in heaven's gable. An apple tree with its December glinting fruit we saw. Oh, you, Eve, were the world that tempted me to eat the knowledge that grew in clay and death the germ within it. Now and then I can remember something of the gay garden that was childhood's. Again, the tracks of cattle to a drinking place, a green stone lying sideways in a ditch, or any common sight, the transfigured face of a beauty that the world did not touch. My father played the melodeon outside our gate. There were stars in the morning east, and they danced to his music. Across the wild bogs, his melodeon called to Lennons and Callans. As I pulled my trousers in a hurry, I knew that some strange thing had happened. Outside in the cowhouse, my mother made the music of milking, and the light of her stable lamp was a star, and the frost of Bethlehem made it twinkle. A water hen screeched in the bog. Mass-going feet crunched the wafer ice on the potholes. Somebody wistfully twisted the bellows wheel. My child poet picked out the letters on the grey stone in silver, the wonder of a Christmas townland, the winkling glitter of a frosty dawn. Cassiopeia was over Cassidy's hanging hill. I looked, and 3 whin bushes rode across the horizon, the 3 wise kings. An old man passing said, "Can't he make it talk, the melodeon?" I hid in the doorway and tightened the belt of my box-pleated coat. I nicked 6 nicks on the doorpost with my penknife's big blade. There was a little one for cutting tobacco, and I was 6 Christmases of age. My father played the melodeon, my mother milked the cows, and I had a prayer like a white rose pinned on the Virgin Mary's blouse. The Virgin Mary is the subject of this next poem, which was written by Paula Meehan. Paula Meehan is quite a famous Irish poet now, who has won many accolades and prizes for her poetry. She too grew up as a working class girl in Dublin's inner city. And she tells a story about one of her favourite images was that of the statue in the Pro Cathedral of the Star of the Sea, or the Virgin Mother, who stands up in a crescent moon, her head surrounded by stars. And then many years later, she wrote this poem. And the poem was written in response to a shocking event that happened in Ireland in 1984. And in that month, the month of January, the end of January 1984, a 15-year-old girl named Anne Lovett died giving birth in secret to her baby son at the hillside of a grotto on the outskirts of her hometown of Granard, County Longford. It was a very sad story, and the fact that she was found by a passerby, her baby was dead, and then she herself died later that day in hospital. I think a whole generation still remembers Anne Lovett and that awful heartbreak and loneliness that was associated with her story. because Ireland, even in those times, even in the 80s, to give birth outside of marriage was still seen as a terrible thing to happen to any girl. And the shame and the secrecy surrounded by such an event, I suppose, brought this to the attention of the whole of the country. And this wonderful poem was written in response to that terrible event. The Statue of the Virgin Mary at Granard Speaks, by Paula Meehan. It can be bitter here at times like this. November, wind sweeping across the border. Its seeds of ice would cut you to the quick. The whole town tucked up safe and dreaming, even wild things gone to earth. And I stuck up here in this grotto without as much as star or planet to ease my vigil. The howling won't let up. Trees cavort in agony as if they would be free and take off. Ghost voyagers on the wind that carries intimations of garrison towns, walled cities, ghetto lanes where men hunt each other and invoke the various names of God as blessing on their death tactics, their night maneuvers. Closer to home, the wind sails over dying lakes. I hear fish drowning. I taste the stagnant water mingled with turf smoke from outlying farms. They call me Mary, Blessed, Holy Virgin. They fit me to a myth of a man crucified, the scourging and the falling again, the thorny crown, the hammer blow of iron into wrist and ankle, the sacred bleeding heart. They name me mother of all this grief, though mated to no mortal man. They kneel before me, and their prayers fly up like sparks from a bonfire that blaze a moment and then wink out. It can be lovely here at times. Springtime, early summer, girls in communion frocks, pale rivals to the riot in the hedgerows of cow parsley and haw blossom, the perfume from every rushy acre that's left for hay, when the light swings longer and the sun pushes north. Or the grace of a midsummer wedding, when the earth herself calls out for coupling, and I would break loose of my stony robes, pure blue, pure white, as if they had been robbed from a child's sky for their colour. My being cries out to be incarnate, immaculate and tussled in a honeyed bed. Even an autumn burial can work its own pageantry. The hedges heavy with the burden of fruiting, crab, sloe, berry, hip. The clouds scud east, pear-scented. Wind falls secret in long orchard grasses, and some old soul is lowered to his kin. Death is just another harvest, scripted by the season's play. But on this All Souls' night, there is no respite from the keening of the wind. I would not be amazed if every corpse came risen from the graveyard to join in exaltation with the gale, a cacophony of bone imploring sky for judgment and release from being the conscience of the town. On a night like this, I remember the child who came with 15 summers to her name, and she lay down at my feet without midwife or doctor or friend to hold her hand, and she pushed her secret out into the night, far from the town, tucked up in little scandals, bargains struck, words broken, prayers, promises. And though she cried out to me in extremis, I did not move. I didn't lift a finger to help her. I didn't intercede with heaven, nor whisper the charmed word in God's ear. On a night like this, I number the days to the solstice and the turn back to the light. O sun, center of our foolish dance, burning heart of stone, molten mother of us all, hear me and have pity. There's quite a bit of religion running through these poems, as you may have gathered now. And the next poem continues a little on that theme. It's the poem by Seamus Heaney, When All the Others Were Away at Mass. And it's a wonderful poem where Heaney invokes that camaraderie between himself and his mother as they stand at the sink doing the daily chore of peeling the potatoes. And it's a thing I've often done with my own mother, or indeed my own father, who was given that chore. And we'd stand, and I can still hear those potatoes slapping into the water as we finished with them. And especially on a Sunday, when my mum would have the roast in the oven and you could smell the meat, and the potatoes would be near enough the last thing to be put on. And I would do that with my dad. And again, you'd feel that closeness. Or sometimes to come in and see mum and dad doing it together at the sink. And I think this wonderful poem by Seamus Heaney expresses all that love and silence and moments between people. When All the Others Were Away at Mass by Seamus Heaney. When all the others were away at Mass, I was all hers as we peeled potatoes. They broke the silence, let fall one by one, like solder weeping off the soldering iron. Cold comfort set between us, things to share gleaming in a bucket of clean water, and again let fall. Little pleasant splashes from each other's work would bring us to our senses. So, while the parish priest at her bedside went hammer and tongs at the prayers for the dying, and some were responding, and some were crying, I remembered her head bent towards my head, her breath in mine, our fluent dipping knives, never closer the whole rest of our lives. The next poem I've chosen to read to you today is by Paul Durcan, who is also very much beloved by Irish people in general, and again has visited Brazil, as you know. And his poem that was chosen is called Making Love Outside Áras an Uachtaráin. Sorry. And Áras an Uachtaráin is the big house, basically, in the Phoenix Park, which is home to the president. It's the president's home. And as you drive by in your car or walk by in the Phoenix Park, you can see the house. And it's a very beautiful park where people go walking the whole time, one of the biggest parks, city parks actually in the whole of Europe. And during the summer, you see people wandering by all the time, running, jogging, walking, cycling. And Paul Durcan wrote this beautiful poem when De Valera was the president of Ireland. De Valera was known to be a strict Catholic and quite old-fashioned in his way of thinking. And to write such a poem at this time shows how Ireland is changing and was changing. So we've got Paul Durcan's lovely Making Love Outside Áras an Uachtaráin. When I was a boy, myself and my girl used to bicycle up to the Phoenix Park. Outside the gates, we used to lie in the grass, making love outside Áras an Uachtaráin. Often I wondered what De Valera would have thought inside his ivory tower if he knew that we were in the green, green grass making love outside Áras an Uachtaráin. Because the odd thing was, oh, how odd it was, we both revered Irish patriots, and we dreamed our dreams of a green, green flag making love outside Áras an Uachtaráin. But even had our names been Diarmid than Grania, we doubted De Valera's approval for a poet's son and a judge's daughter making love outside Áras an Uachtaráin. I see him now in the heat haze of the day, blindly stalking us down and levelling an ancient rifle. He says, "Stop making love outside Áras an Uachtaráin." And so we come to the last poem today of my selection, which is Quarantine by Evan Boland. She is a wonderful Irish poet who sadly died in 2020, I think, quite recently anyway. She was the daughter of a diplomat and grew up in many places in UK, in the States, but always regarded herself very much as an Irish poet. And this is a beautiful poem written about love and during the time of the terrible famine which devastated Ireland in 1847. Quarantine by Evan Boland. In the worst hour of the worst season of the worst year of a whole people, a man set out from the workhouse with his wife. He was walking, they were both walking north. She was sick with famine fever and could not keep up. He lifted her and put her on his back. He walked like that, west and north, until at nightfall, under freezing stars, they arrived. In the morning, they were both found dead, of cold, of hunger, of the toxins of a whole history. But her feet were held against his breastbone. The last heat of his flesh was his last gift to her. Let no love poem ever come to this threshold. There is no place here for the inexact praise of the easy graces and sensuality of the body. There is only time for this merciless inventory. Their death together in the winter of 1847. Also, what they suffered, how they lived, and what there is between a man and a woman, and in which darkness it can best be proved. So there, I'll leave it with you. We have those 6 poems. Interestingly, this was also followed up by a quest for Ireland's favourite folk song. And again, the winner turned out to be the wonderful, wonderful Raglan Road, which was sung by Luke Kelly of the Dubliners. And amazingly, Raglan Road is indeed a poem which was written by Patrick Kavanagh and put to music. And I'm going to turn you over now to listen and enjoy this wonderful rendition of Raglan Road, which is Ireland's favourite folk song. And maybe in the chat, just out of interest, you might like to indicate what was your favourite poem from those 6 that I read for you today. And we will come back very quickly after Luke Kelly and let you know what your favourite poems were. Okay, let's go with the music.
On Raglan Road of an autumn day, I saw her first and knew that her dark hair would weave a snare that I might one day rue. I saw the danger and I passed along the enchanted way, and I said, let grief be a fallen leaf at the dawning of the day. On Grafton Street in November, we tripped lightly along the ledge of a deep ravine where can be seen the worth of passion's pledge. The Queen of Hearts still making tarts, and I not making hay. Oh, I loved too much, and by such is happiness thrown away. I gave her gifts of the mind, I gave her the secret sign that's known to the artists who have known the true gods of sound and the stone, and word and tint without stint. I gave her poems to say, with her own name there, and her own dark hair, like clouds over fields of May. On a quiet street where old ghosts meet, I see her walking now, away from me so hurriedly. My reason must allow that I had loved not as I should, a creature made of clay. When the angel woos, the clay he'd lose his wings at the dawn of day.
And that's where we're going to leave it with you for the moment. Just to, I'm going to pass over to Laura now, who's going to finish up. And just to tell you that Ireland's favourite poem from those ones that I recited today was the Seamus Heaney one about peeling potatoes with his mum. So you can also decide on what was your favourite. That's one of mine. I also have a great grow for Paul Durcan, and that's another one of my favourites. Laura, how about you? I don't think your mic is on, Laura.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Susan, for your readings. And then indeed, I have chosen mine before your reading. And then when you read them, well, I think I do not know which is my favorite. But yes, I think that Paul Durcan's is very funny. It has many connotations. And though Seamus Heaney, it was my first choice, but then listening to your reading, I said, oh my God, Paul Durcan's is great to see all this irony that is behind it. And then reading also Paul Meehan and Evan Boland's poem, the last poem, it is great. This is the meaning of love, I would say, with Evan Boland's showing that in such a tragic moment that she is representing tragic moment for Ireland at that time. So quarantine also brings us some echoes of what we are living quarantine with the pandemic and all these things. But yes, indeed, it's so difficult to choose. But then let's see what our audience will choose, and we leave that for you to send us a message so that after receiving, I know that many of you will be seeing this video later on at any other time. So take your time to see it, and when you see it, try to send us your favorite poem. And then, as this is our last broadcast of poetry at midday for this year, because we know that, for example, students and teachers and are very much busy at the end of their school year, and now we have Christmas, so we would like to give you a gift once you send us your favorite poem. And this gift will be one of our chair's publications, and they will be there to send that to you, thanking you for following us throughout this year. We started in May, so everything started to be the architecture of this broadcast started after St. Patrick's Day, after seeing Susan reading Paul Durcan's poem at that time. And then we invited her to join us in this enterprise, we would say, an adventure of poetry at midday. And she very generously accepted our invitation. And here we are since May. So 6 months having this broadcast. And then, of course, we will start again on February, the last Wednesday of February, and celebrating St. Bridget's also day. So thank you very much. Thank you, Susan, for making this real. And it has been a great experience, I know, because we have been receiving many comments in the private email of the chair. And then we look forward to see you all next year in February. And we wish you a happy Christmas and very happy New Year. And to start, our hope to start next year back at the university, receiving also Susan life in front of us at the university, and broadcasting to all of those who are in other parts of Brazil and abroad. Susan, I do not know if you want to say something else.
Just like to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Laura. And I'm enjoying it very much and learning a lot as I go along. So we'll see you all soon again.
Thank you. And thank you, Anna Carolina. You can just show your face for all the people to see that you are in the backstage of this broadcasting. Bye-bye. See you. And a very nice end of the year and the beginning of the new one. Thank you. Thank you, Susan.